Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. And I'm very happy for every one of you that are joining us here on YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble. We are always grateful for every one of you that make this broadcast a priority. It is one of our labors of love as a ministry and as a house to sit with you each week, and that's one of the things that something messed up there. One of the things that we enjoy doing as a family and as a house is doing these updates. And what we found is that many people had disconnected from the news. Some of you were among them. In fact, my own primo even said that. I don't even listen to this stuff. And that can be very dangerous, not know the things that are going on in the world. That can be very problematic. At the same time, we can become overwhelmed. I was one of those people that would get all these updates. Maybe you're one of them. And it got to the point where you couldn't even function before you were getting another update and more things that you really didn't need to know, things that weren't necessary for you to keep in your thinking at all times. But nevertheless, they got to drive their numbers, right? So one of the things that we found is that just really not healthy. And so around here, what we like to say is we like to be informed without being overwhelmed. We like to know what's going on without it being, controlling our day, if you will. And so the weekly news update allows us to get that 10,000 foot view from a scriptural perspective so that we can see things as Elohim is revealing them. And also in ensuring that we are aware of the progression toward the end. And after all, we are commanded to watch. How many know that, right? We're all commanded to watch. Just want to say a hearty welcome to all of my brothers and sisters out here, especially members of Remnant House. Always appreciate you being with us. And on our we have a website here that we made available for all of the stories and different things that we're going to be going over. And of course, remnantwatch.com, remnantwatch.com. We have to stay on watch. That is required. So we are not allowed to completely disconnect, but we have to be wise, right? So paying attention to these things allows us to be aware without being, again, overwhelmed. And these stories are aggregated here on this site. So all the stories and things that we cover in any of our updates, you'll find on Remnant Watch. And please do me a favor and like and subscribe if you haven't already, and encourage your brothers and sisters, because the more we're all on the same page, the more we see more things together and we can talk about them. It really helps our unity. It helps us to see through the some of the nonsense, some of the trivia, some of the attempts by our adversary to create conflict inside of the household of faith. And I don't know if you're picking that up, but there's quite a bit of effort attempting to divide. And this has been a tactic that has been used since the beginning. So we have to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves. Amen. And so just want to encourage every one of you that are out there, don't allow, things that we cover. Sometimes they're difficult stories to review. But, let me encourage you. You see all these people here on the chat, whether you're on YouTube or on Facebook. These are your brothers and sisters. These are people who are just like you. And, we all need one another. We need encouragement one from another. It's one of the reasons why we have a discussion board. It's a private discussion board just for the remnant. And a lot of times people will disconnect from social media. One of my brothers was off for 2 weeks, just had to take a break. My brother Jerael takes breaks periodically. You'll always find him over on our discussion board, because that we don't wear out on. But in the world, that can really tax you. Some of you know what I'm talking about. All right. So you've been taxed a little bit out there, and so glad that you're all together. And I also want to, before we get into the news, encourage you all to pray one for another. I saw a prayer request that scrolled by on the chat from one of my dear brethren. And but I want to encourage you all to pray for one another, to stand in faith for one another, and stand against the wiles of the enemy. Now let's get into the news. And tonight we've got a few stories to cover here on Remnant Watch. And there's been several things that have been going on over the last week. And of course, you guys are awesome. You're staying on top of stuff. Some of you feed me stories. I mean, you guys are really sharp. And I just want to commend you for that. I think it's wonderful. I love the interaction. I love your comments. So thank you for that. And again, the more we're on the same page, the better it is for our fellowship moving forward. Now, this top story, it just came out today. Iran-backed forces carry out new deadly attacks targeting U.S. troops. So we know that peace is taken from the earth. In the book of Revelation, it tells us that. And so we know that this is where we're headed, if you will, to that final conflagration. But nevertheless, we're still watching this slow stoke up, if you will. And this has been challenging. Deadly drone attack hits training ground in Syrian base housing U.S. troops. So Sunday's attack, this just happened yesterday. Sunday's attack hit a training ground at Al Omar base in Syria's eastern province of Deir al-Zur. And so they're reporting that a drone attack on Sunday evening that struck a military base in eastern Syria where U.S. troops were stationed left at least 6 allied Kurdish soldiers dead, officials said. And so this is an indication that the forces that are playing around in the theater of operations there in the Middle East don't mean to stop anytime soon. The strike was the first significant attack in Syria or Iraq since the U.S. launched strikes over the weekend against Iran-backed militia. And so this is slowly going to heat up. We knew that. We knew that it would. We saw the rhetoric. We saw the back and forth. But the only question was, how long would it take? You know, it's kind of like standing around in the schoolyard and you got the instigators, you know, the ones that are standing around the kids going, ooh, you're going to let him do that to you? Ooh, you're going to let him say that? Ooh, he called you this? Ooh, he just insulted you. I mean, we've all been children in a playground and we've all seen fights start. At least most of us have. And that's how they start. They start with people provoking and calling each other out like, ooh, I can't believe you're letting them do that to you. Ooh, why? Because you need that pride thing kicking in. You know, you need that contention thing happening. And so that's what we're watching here. I mean, we're watching schoolyard nonsense, and it's spilling over into affect people's lives. And this is extremely, of course, dangerous. And nevertheless, you know, we knew this was coming. So, you know, to be informed is to be prepared. I mean, that's a big part of being prepared. If you're unaware of drama and trouble, then that can catch you by surprise. But when you know it's there, it's a lot easier to deal with. It's a lot easier to navigate. And so again, just to encourage all of you, because that's what we want to do. We want to encourage you. We want you to be blessed and strengthened in your inner man. And so, you know, some of these stories, again, don't be alarmed by what we show you. We're just showing it to you to show you that we're progressing through through scriptural prophecy, that we're moving through what was prophesied by Elohim. The Pentagon is, of course, instructing U.S. troops stationed in Iraq. So this came out today. Thank you, Mike Adams, over at naturalnews.com. And the Pentagon instructs U.S. troops stationed in Iraq to be prepared for possible Israel-Hamas war escalation. And an online nonprofit news organization acquired a copy of a memo from the U.S. Department of Defense that ordered U.S. Air Force personnel to remain on standby in case of on-ground U.S. involvement in the Israel-Hamas war. So the expectation, according to them, is that this is going to happen. Now, how many know that they don't warn except that they're prepared to do this? I mean, it's all theatrics. Citing a DoD document that circulated earlier this month, The Intercept reported that troops stationed in Iraq since last year are being forewarned to prepare to be deployed. Now, I have some natural confirmation to this because I happen to have one of our members whose son is stationed overseas, and I can tell you that they, in fact, blatantly said over a year ago, we're going to war. So they have long been warning to prepare for conflict. So the fact that this now hits the news media, if you will, or comes out, is again legal notice that they're letting you know where they're going and what their plan is. And remember that nothing, according to Psalm 2, comes across and comes into the earth except that it passed the desk of Yahushua HaMashiach, King of all glory. And so don't be alarmed again by the things that you see. Just understand that this is part of the process of the harvest. No other way to say that. This is part of the process. And many, many, many shall be the slain of Yahuwah. Okay, many shall be the slain of Yahuwah. And this is one of those things that, several speakers have been talking about. Several people are hitting on this. And I encourage you, brethren, to look into that because, again, remember who it is that sends the strong delusion. Okay, because they wouldn't believe the truth. They believed a lie instead. And in retaliation, so we're seeing some things going back and forth. So, Iran's not backing down. Neither are the Houthis. They're not backing down. And U.S. airstrikes on Iraq, Syria, aimed at escalating the conflict further, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova, which said that the United States has been deliberately attempting to get the region's major nations dragged into conflict. So this is openly being discussed. This is on the front page of the news here. This is not even hidden. This is like out in front. They are straight saying it. They know what you're up to. You're trying to drag us into a conflict that they already know is illegitimate. It's not a legitimate conflict, okay? Moscow, February 3rd, the United States airstrikes on Iraq and Syria pursue the goal of inflaming the conflict further in the Middle East. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova said. Obviously, the airstrikes are deliberately aimed at fueling the conflict further, the diplomat said, attacking the targets of allegedly pro-Iranian groups in Iraq and Syria nearby nonstop recently. The United States has been deliberately attempting to get the major nations, dragged into conflict, which I believe is true. And I don't believe it is necessarily the United States. I certainly don't believe it is the citizens of the United States. And I don't even think it's the government necessarily of the United States. I believe that the U.S. was captured a long time ago as a weapon, and it is being used as such to do harm. And so continue to pray for those in leadership, those who are assigned to certain things, that they would follow accordingly. But nevertheless, folks, this is Bible prophecy coming to pass. And so we know that this theater of operation, this area of the world, has many judgments coming, and it's not likely to be very pretty. So this is one of those times when getting your affairs in order, knowing where you are, taking your life seriously. This is a moment. And I believe people will, in time to come, look back on this time period and say, where were you when these things occurred? And so we need to be sober and vigilant in this hour. And Iran is now saying, now they're publicizing this. And again, this is something that we were hearing from probably, I want to say, the late 90s and early 2000s. Some of you guys that go back that far, help me out. Comments in the description or comments down below. I'd like your thoughts on this. But I seem to recall this specific threat is constantly being recycled. It's almost like, when they feel like they're pretty close to ready to going, they bring this out, and then it goes away again. And it's always like, they're 6 months away, they're 3 months away. Well, those 6 months and 3 months have come and gone so many times. So, once again, we have to read everything with a bit of a grain of salt, right? And see what's really happening. And Iran can build, quote, you can see what it says, in 1 week, signaling extreme danger. I don't believe in those things, by the way. I don't believe they actually even exist. So there's that. for the Western world, report says. So signaling extreme danger. Iran has enough weapon-grade uranium to produce its first, mass casualty event, right? And again, who is most likely to do that kind of harm? Well, based on a history that we've all reviewed, we could pick groups, but it probably wouldn't be Iran that we would put on the top of the list of the people most likely to do something like that, even if that were possible. So we're not buying this, but this is what they're telling the world. So if they're telling this to the world, right, and they're telling this to everybody out there like, ooh, the boogeyman, then they're gearing up. Then they're setting the stage, right? So they're establishing the narrative that they want to use. And again, they just keep demonizing and demonizing and demonizing, which I think is really, really dangerous. Again, Saints, it's really easy to take a side when both sides have dirty hands, and we're seeing a lot of that. So we need to be really careful getting sort of sucked into these things, and that includes anything going on in this whole theater. Don't get sucked into debates and arguments over it. You can pray over people and be generous and kind to everyone, because I believe we are getting so much disinformation and so many lies. In fact, we're going to hit some stories on that to talk about that. And as a matter of fact, this takes us right into the heart of that conflict going on in the Middle East. And take a look at this story. This one's really disturbing. Israel destroys UNRWA to prevent enforcement of the ICJ order. Okay, so the International Court of Justice has issued an order in the case between South Africa and Israel over ongoing genocidal acts in Gaza, and it states inter alia that the state of Israel must take immediate action and effective measures to enable the provision of basic services and urgently needed humanitarian assistance to alleviate the difficult living conditions of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. You would think this was common sense. These are innocent people who are not involved in your conflict. So once again, if you're going to just destroy the places, listen to this, however, basic services and humanitarian can only be distributed by the United States Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East. Within hours of the verdict, the state of Israel launched a campaign against the UN agency. It immediately announced 12 UNRWA employees had participated in Operation Al-Aqsa Flood in September or October 7th. And without delay, Washington withdrew its funding from the agency, and the UN Secretary General has called for not throwing the baby out with the bathwater in order to ensure the continuity of UNRWA's operations. And of course, they tanked it. Okay, so they tanked it. And instead of dealing with all that, they just destroyed it. How's that for a solution? We'll just blow it up. You guys make your own judgments. I'd love your thoughts in the comment section below. I really would. But I think this is getting wild. It's getting wild out there. Wilder and wilder. Okay. That's some strange stuff, right? They just destroyed the UNRWA so they could prevent the enforcement. Wow. And this really was an interesting. So again, just keeping an eye on this here, and we try not to make any judgments. We're sure not trying to take any sides in any of these silly conflicts, but we do pay attention, right? So we're paying attention as information comes out, because this tells us a lot. It's like, aha, so that's why you did that, and that's why you did that, and things begin to make sense. So pay attention to this, guys, because as this stuff comes leaking out, it's telling you. I mean, so they're not really hiding this. This actually came out a little bit ago, and we're just now catching up. Israeli media admits Hamas atrocity propaganda was made up to drum up support for the war. So this is one of the things that is now coming out. That's the problem with, when time goes by, you got cooler heads can prevail, and what happens? We start to get the real deal. Look at this. A pregnant woman cut open. Guys, the things that are happening are so sick. Yeah, this also didn't happen, right? And so they're finding out a lot of stories and a lot of things that were used to drum up support turned out to not be true. Israeli media outlet Channel 13 is now openly admitting that Israeli officials made up Hamas atrocity propaganda about babies on October 7 being killed in mass, baked in an oven, and so on to drum up support for Israel's war in Gaza. So this is not me reporting this. This is coming out, and it's really interesting. Some of the information that is now coming forward. So I encourage you to, take some time and familiarize yourself. This article is available on Remnant Watch, and this is some really difficult stuff. Okay, so again, here's what happens when you pray for light. This is the kind of stuff that happens. They can't control it. As I've told you all before, and I think it bears repeating here, since 2015, their invisibility spell was broken, and everything they're doing is exposed. So there's a prophecy that is attached to this. And the prophecy is that the enemy or the wicked one would be destroyed by the brightness of the king's coming. And I've always understood that to be the light that would appear in the earth just before the coming of the king. So reconciling all things that were hidden would be revealed, right? So all things that were kept in secret would then come into the open. And many of you have experienced that, where you now know who the imposter is. You now know who is the instead of Mashiach. And this has been revealed to the remnant. It is still percolating out to the rest of the body. So if you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. But it is percolating out. And this is, again, another fulfillment. So we knew, based on the prophecy, that we would see light, and it would continue to increase unto the coming of the king. And it would, in fact, be that light that would cause these reactions, because as long as they were getting away with everything, they were nice and cool, calm and collected. They were in charge, and they did all their wickedness in the dark. Now the lights come into the dark. Now they're not so cool, calm, and collected. Have you noticed that they're a little more nervous these days? Not quite so calm. Okay. And Russia and China are not, of course, buying a lot of the propaganda, because they know the truth. They know things. And this is why we compare things, because hints will come out and we can start to discern what the real stories about different things might be. And thankfully, there are honest voices still in the earth. So we are able to still discern, but it's getting bad. It's getting tough to know who are and who aren't the good guys, right? And these guys aren't necessarily the good guys. They're just on the other side. Russia and China warn against a cycle of retaliation as Biden threatens to target their ally, Iran. Did you hear that? Their ally, Iran. And after drone attacks killed 3 U.S. soldiers. So the United States has vowed to respond, which it did, and to the drone attacks in Jordan. But Beijing and Moscow have both urged Biden to show restraint as he purportedly plots which targets to strike in retaliation against Iran and its proxies. Now, you're going to see how that they're repositioning themselves. So a war with Iran could very easily trigger a war with these other 2 superpowers, and you're going to see that. So this whole thing is being set up, saints. And this reminds me of the prophecy of Dmitry Duduman, that the U.S. would be struggling with its own internal conflict, which we're seeing build, and be struggling with its own internal battles, and then it would be attacked. So that is slowly looking more and more possible, literally by the day, that there will be a coalition of countries that will come to do business if this continues down this road. And so this is a difficult time. This is a time to find your place and a time to be sober and vigilant. And Israel's not predicting any slowdown. They're not, they're committed to this plan, whatever it is that they made, whatever plan they made in the dark, man, they're committed to it. And they're losing a lot of guys. Don't let them tell you they're not. They are. Israel's military sees it's taking all of 2024. So we're going to be putting up with this narrative for a minute to eliminate Hamas threat or longer. And I believe they need a running conflict considering where we're headed in this particular year. So we're not dumb. We know that there's a lot going on they want to try to prevent, right? And, those of you that know politically what's going on, you know that they're going to use every mechanism they can. The Israeli military said it's engaged in the fiercest fighting yet in Gaza, in the southern city of Khan Yunis, where it hopes to kill or capture Hamas leaders presumed to be hiding in tunnels with hostages. Israeli troops have killed or captured most of the commanders of 2 Hamas 5 fighting brigades, both based in the north of Gaza, an Israeli military intelligence officer said in a briefing. So they are making progress. If their goal is annihilation of Hamas, then they're attacking Hamas, then that's one thing. Unfortunately, the collateral damage is what everyone is noticing. So, there's a lot of blaming going on. There's a lot of people not happy. Okay, a lot of blaming that looks like it's going back and forth. And several years ago, Elohim gave me a word about this gentleman, that his time was wrapping up, and his losing his grip is the word I got. Is he losing his grip on power? And so this is really interesting. When I saw this article today, it reminded me of that short little broadcast that I did a couple years ago about this. And many Israelis want Netanyahu out. So he's never been more unpopular. If they have an election now, he's done. Okay, but there's no simple path to do it. So they need some type of intervention. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel is on his last legs, and it is widely believed and will be forced to relinquish, his post once the war against Hamas in Gaza ends. So we now have an incentive to extend this. And we've all picked that up. He is historically unpopular in the opinion polls and blamed for the governmental and security failures that led to the October 7th attack by Hamas, the killing of an estimated 1,200 Israelis, and the difficult war that has followed. So, and that's another great point, Jeremiah. What's to say that these so-called leaders are even in Gaza right now? So we don't even know. Again, there's so much theatrics to all of this. But one thing we can tell you for certain is that there's a lot of shifting going on. And one of the things that I believe Elohim is doing is giving us literally our fill. Do you remember when they came out of Egypt and they were complaining to Moses about not having enough and not having any meat, right? They were tired of the manna, so they wanted Elohim to provide the meat, and he gave them so much. He said it will be coming out of your mouths, right? And this is what I see him doing with this whole concept of war. It's like we're going to be so sick of war by the time this is over. We're going to be so ready to beat our swords into plowshares. It's not even funny. And that's the prophecy. Remember that, guys. The prophecy is where we're going, right? Beyond these conflicts is a place where we're all done with war forever. We're all done. The wars of all millennia finally come to a conclusion. Somebody say hallelujah, because I don't know about you, but I'm so ready for that day. I just really don't like seeing loss of life. And I don't care whose side it's on. I really just don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me at all. And this must have been a blow to Israel, because Israel and Germany was supplying weapons, right? Just last week or the week before, I think we had a story where Germany was supplying ammunition. Remember that, guys? Well, this isn't going quite the way they thought. EU must work toward a two-state solution in Israel, German foreign minister says. So the shift of the wind is huge right now. A two-state solution to allow for the peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians is, quote, the only solution, end quote, to the current conflict. German Foreign Minister Annalena Beerbach said on Monday before heading into a EU foreign ministers meeting. So the sentiment seems to be that the solution to the problem in the Middle East is this two-state solution. Will that be allowed? I don't know. But I can tell you this. This current state, this current status quo will eventually come to an end. How will it come to an end? I'd like to know. That's going to be an interesting thing, isn't it? I love your thoughts in the comments. This is going to be an interesting review this week. Another thing that I thought was really interesting and sort of throwing this into the mix, because I do believe that his tenure will be short. And so now they're setting this narrative in place. Are you catching that? So we started to see the buildup of this narrative. King Charles diagnosed with cancer. He's 75. He's been diagnosed with cancer and will be avoiding public events after being advised by his doctors to minimize in-person contact, Buckingham Palace announced on Monday. The announcement marks a striking departure from the past when monarchs' ailments were often hidden from the public, according to royal experts. So we decided to depart from the norm. We decided to not do what we normally do, and we decided to make an announcement. Okay, during the king's recent hospital procedure for benign prostate enlargement, a separate issue of concern was noted, the palace said in an emailed statement. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. The statement also did not specify what stage the cancer was found. And separately, Buckingham Palace says Charles did not have prostate cancer. So at least we can eliminate that. Thanks for letting us know. And of course, I do believe that this is an area we're going to have to be paying attention because there's just too much going on there. So we're gonna keep our eyes on Charles and the crown. Now, if he starts to take, I did see a report. I don't see it here, but I saw another report where he was going to begin treatment, which would include radiation and chemotherapy, I would imagine. And I just want to remind everyone that the survival rate for that treatment is 3%. 3% of the people who go through that type of treatment survive. It doesn't have a good prognosis. And so that is not a good sign. I'm starting to wonder, and I'm sure some of you are, what are they doing? Are they going to put someone else in his place? So this is going to be interesting. Let's keep watching. And the U.S. is obviously expressing itself in eastern Syria. And this was an interesting report. I found this to be a little fascinating. So staying in this theater just a little bit longer, U.S. aggression, according to this report, is aimed to revive Daesh, which is ISIS, right? In Iraq, Syrian Defense Ministry says. So they've got their opinion on what's happening here. The Syrian Defense Ministry has blasted deadly strikes by the U.S. occupation forces against a number of sites in Iraq and Syria, saying Washington's assault is aimed at reviving ISIS or Daesh terrorist group in the two neighboring countries. Syria's state news agency, Sana, cited the ministry as making the remark in a statement on Saturday, hours after the U.S. Central Command said its forces had struck more than 85 targets with numerous aircraft during overnight raids in localities in Iraq and Syria. So I won't be surprised if we suddenly start hearing more and more about Daesh and about ISIS and who knows what else, right? And again, this is all part of the mental warfare, the state of siege, that if you put people in, you have an easier time persuading them in one direction or another. We may still not even be seeing what their ultimate goal is, because they may be just getting us to position where they then can spring on you, hey, we need to do this, right? And so this is seriously, situation is seriously deteriorating. Now, one of the things that I think we're all noticing, and I think you'd have to be really naive and very, very foolish to give everybody a pass, right? And one of the things that I've talked about this is the moral high ground, right, guys? So one of the things they have to have in order for them to go to war, why would they lie about stories? Why would they pump up the public and get them all up in arms about things that didn't even happen, but if they did happen would be just atrocities, right? That's why, because they need the high ground. In order to do some of the things they're going to do, they need the people of the earth, if you will, to believe that they're the good guys, right? Everybody's always battling the good guys. The reason why the United States was able to do so much in the world is because they came out of World War II as the good guys. Okay, that was the packaging. That was the way it was sold to the world. And they, Bretton Woods came out, and next thing you know, the world reserve currency, and away they go, right? Well, that only works so long as you are the good guys, okay? So that when your integrity is tested, you come out as gold. When people aren't sure what your motives are, and then you show your motives to be pure and good, well, then you continue to lead. But what happens if after they've given you that sort of, moniker, you start to show what your real intentions are? Well, they're not going to give you the high ground anymore, guys. And that's what's really happening here. Take a look at this. World opinion. The world public opinion witnessing the moral decline. This is what's really happening. It is a moral decline. We are not doing the things we normally would do. We're not being the good guys. You see what I'm saying? And this is a real problem in the world. Iran says the world's public opinion, and this is 95% live outside the United States. So, that's not hard to believe. Iran says the world public opinion is witnessing the moral decline. So that's a really interesting point of view for them outside, or for those that are, adversarials of the United States, to be looking at the U.S. and saying, you're morally bankrupt. This gives them the high ground. You understand? Mentally, just understand how this plays out. When people believe there's a bad group, it allows them to do a coalition against the bad group, right? That's what's being attempted on this other side. And it's a moral decline is what they're calling the collapse of the West and the Gaza Strip after the discovery of tens of thousands decomposing bodies of blindfolded Palestinians dumped inside a schoolyard in a northern besieged territory. The bodies of many Palestinian civilians have been discovered among the debris and garbage in northern Gaza, where the Israeli occupation forces tied their hands and eyes and then executed them. Spokesman for the Iranian Foreign Ministry, Nasser Kanani, wrote in a published post on X, formerly known as Twitter, on Wednesday. Now, I saw video. I'm not posting it. It's too gruesome, but you can find it on BitChute, guys. So it ain't hard to find. And you see them doing this exact thing. They walk these guys into a pit and execute them, and they videotaped it. So they can't deny that this is true, because I saw the videotape sitting here in the desert, which means everybody who's a security officer for any country, right? So all the hundreds of countries all have security forces, and they all have intelligence agencies. They all saw this. So this is what I'm saying, is that the moral high ground is evaporating super fast here. And then you have these guys over here saying, we're going to do this all year. So this has got nothing but conflict written all over it for the world, just exactly as prophesied. And we are seeing some attempts. I'm not sure if this is just brinksmanship or if it's manipulation, but, we've been watching the whole China theater, right? And the United States sent over its diplomat, I guess, following the meeting with the two leaders in San Francisco. And Wang and Sullivan meeting creates momentum for future progress in China-U.S. ties. So that's a good sign if it's real. So we'll see. Contention on Taiwan question still to persist, according to experts. So this was a good sign, though, guys. Senior Chinese and U.S. diplomats Wang Yi and Jake Sullivan concluded meetings lasting more than 12 hours on Friday and Saturday in Bangkok, Thailand, which was characterized as candid, substantive, and fruitful. Strategic communication on implementing the consensus reached by the two heads of state at the San Francisco summit. So, yeah, I have to agree, moral bankruptcy is everywhere, so nobody's got the high ground. But I do believe that this is a good thing. The more people just communicate and figure out their problems, I can't help but encourage that. When you're a peacemaker, you want to see peace made. So I want to see more peace efforts, but unfortunately, Bible prophecy being what it is, we're probably going to see some of these efforts fail. But nevertheless, it's good. It's good to see at least they're trying to find ways to avoid conflict, which is a good idea. And I do believe that China is being brought to the table through a different form of force. So one of the things that we talked about all year long has been this multi-level warfare, right? Multi-level. It's not just, weapons. So it's also financial. And that is a huge one that is happening right now across the world. So many of you who are very savvy have been paying attention to this, and that there's a lot of attacks that are happening financially or to infrastructure, right? So Beijing is right now suffering because of just some comments. Look at this. Beijing's powerless, and they were already sliding. So there was a lot of things coming out of, Evergrande came out last week, and that was a big deal. Now look at this. Last week's dead cat bounce in Chinese stocks after Beijing did everything but launch a multi-trillion fiscal stymie bazooka. Something it will do later, if not sooner, in a distant memory. And as Asian markets open for trading in the news week, China's markets are cratering, with the Shanghai Composite plunging as much as 3.1% to a fresh 5-year low, and it's not looking good going forward. The reason why I bring this up, guys, is because we saw evidence last week, if you remember, excuse me, that Chinese Premier President Xi Jinping was dealing with his generals and dealing with his internal power structure. It may, in fact, be in peril. We don't even know. But one thing we do know about the Chinese culture is they look very, very poorly on poor results. So if this continues, this could mean a shakeup in the leadership of China. Now, this could go either way. So we may find out after the shakeup that Xi Jinping, if he's removed, was holding back problems, right? And maybe there's different opinions that he's pushing back and holding down that we might find if he's removed because he failed, because they blame, maybe a stock failure, or they blame the economy on him. That could mean a change of leadership, and that could mean a change of posture, a change of everything going forward. They always put the nice guy out there first, and then they switch it out and give you the wicked one, right? So, be careful thinking everything's going to be fine. Just be aware that this is an ongoing battle that is going to continue. And again, on this economic front, right? So you guys are super sharp. You've been watching the whole BRICS thing with me. You've been watching the way that this whole global situation is changing. Take a look at this story, and you guys will figure it out real quick. Iraqi Parliament calling to ditch the U.S. dollar for oil trade. Color me surprised. Anybody surprised out there? Anybody? No? You're all on top of it. See, nobody's surprised by this. Washington has exercised strict control over Iraqi oil revenues for the past 2 decades. Okay? Which is what they really want to do. I don't remember there being any Iraqi connections to, the big event. And nevertheless, this is what happened. The Finance Committee in Iraq Parliament made a statement on 31st of January calling for the sale of oil in currencies other than the U.S. dollar, aiming to counter U.S. sanctions on the Iraqi banking system. Does anybody want to say revaluation? I believe that's what's coming. The U.S. Treasury still uses the pretext of money laundering to impose sanctions on Iraqi banks. This requires a national stance to put an end to these arbitrary decisions, the statement said. Imposing sanctions on Iraqi banks undermines and obstructs central bank efforts to stabilize the dollar exchange rate and reduce the selling gap between official and parallel rates, it added. And there are many people that are waiting patiently for the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar. That has been something that has been in the works for a dozen years. So this is big news to hear that Iraq is now bold enough to say we should just sell oil in something other than US dollars. Yeah, somebody said the US is going to find itself running into a brick wall. It's already running into it, and it is changing the world because, when you're bossing countries around and they're sovereign. They may not be as big as you, the USA, but they're still sovereign nations, and you're bossing them around like you own them. They tend to react to that. People tend to react to that. So just saying, and that's what's happening. They're saying, oh, okay, you want to put us all in sanctions? We'll just go ahead and create a whole nother system. Now, do you think China is just going to stand by while this all occurs? Nope. Watch this, guys. You paying attention? Who's head of the BRICS? Here we go. China and Russia, head of the BRICS, right? China poised to take further control. Now you know why they're being so confident, right? Now you know why they're saying what they're saying. Are you getting it? You putting two together now? Okay. China poised to take further control of Iraq's key southern oil assets. China is over the halfway mark in completing its strategic vital oil project in the critical Iraqi energy hub of Nisiriyah. This facility will act as a storage hub and supply conduit for 3 to 3.5 million barrels of crude oil. Even before the huge strategic importance of the new Nasiriyah facility, China will benefit from its massively enhanced presence there in a matter of increasing its oil supplies from southern Iraq, with the Dihar province being home to several fields. So what's happening here? This is physical control. They are literally moving into physical control. So just like in the old days, the USA went out and the petrodollar was tied to protection. So if you trade in petrodollars, right, then we will protect you against any bad guys, except they are to them they are the bad guys. Like it's like making a deal with the devil, right? So now they're making a deal with a different protector. You get it? A different protection is now being afforded, and China and Russia are not blinking. So this is huge, and they're saying that the assets of these oil fields will come under the control of China, which of course is trying to secure their own supply, right? So they want to make sure that they can supply their economy with the fuel it needs. And they're not playing this, green game that all these Western countries were playing. So they're going forward, and this is going to be monumental. All right. A very, very big deal going on here. So this was a huge, huge story, especially considering all the progress that BRICS has made in making its inroads. And so, of course, then we have to have the counter because, this is a war, guys, don't you know? Right? So, yeah, same devil, different country. But look at this security news this week. And this is just coming out through the rumor mill. So pay attention, guys, because some of this might be just flat propaganda. China's hackers keep targeting U.S. water and electricity supplies. Okay, so we're going to watch this a little bit. An indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice may have solved the mystery of how disgraced cryptocurrency exchange FTX lost $400 million. Hey, by the way, whatever happened to that Sam Bankman-Fried? He just sort of walked away and disappeared from the public view. Interesting. I wonder if he'll make a comeback. Hopefully, they'll prosecute some of that, right? So they were basically chasing down all of these hackers and what have you, and they're finding out that the hackers were targeting U.S. critical infrastructure. This week, the Federal Bureau of Investigation Director Christopher Wray said hackers affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party are constantly targeting U.S. critical infrastructure. They're constantly targeting, and it's the Chinese. I don't buy that. But hey, that's the narrative, right? So now it's out there. In other words, it's a plausible reason why, if the water were to go off and if the electricity to go down, they automatically can blame the Chinese and get everybody, again, high ground. Always think high ground, guys. This is a very simple game they play, and they always want to try to take the high ground. They always want to be the good guys, even though we know they're not. I mean, a lot of times we see this through history. It's not just one group or another. It's just the way it works. Just if you're a student of history, you've seen this over and over again. And we know that the powers that be, again, as we said before, they're aware. Again, just to put this back up on the screen real quick, just so you can see this headline. In light of that, they are aware that they're trying to escalate the conflict, right? So there are those that really want the world to go to full-on war because, boy, oh boy, you can just reset everything then, and you can just blame it on the war. You don't have to blame it on the collapse of a failed economic system that was failed from its inception. We don't have to talk about it because we had a war and we just blame the war for everything. So that's why they're trying desperately to get there. So they have this massive excuse, this big blanket that covers all the things that are slowly coming out to the market, like the collapse of, Evergrande and, companies that are just all paper tigers. And I think you're going to see a lot of companies that were basically just laundering operations. And once, their laundering operation is shut down, they're not really a company. Have you ever wondered how some of these companies pay their rent in these expensive real estate? And then all of a sudden now they're going out of business. Well, maybe their money wasn't really coming from the sale of products and services. Maybe it was coming from somewhere else, right? We have to take that into consideration as a possibility. How much of the economy that Western nations are hoping recovers is based on nefarious activity and would not work but for the nefarious activity, right? We're finding out, and I don't think it's going to be a good look. And as a matter of fact, again, even the big money people are starting to talk differently than they used to talk. Look at this. This is really interesting. So Elon Musk comes out and says Biden opened the border floodgates, which has become basically a war zone. I think next week we're going to end up focusing just on Texas, but we all know that there's a buildup going on there. Musk says Biden opened the border floodgates so Democrats can stay in power. So now the latest thing was, which got tanked in the Senate, by the way, but the latest thing was that they were trying to get an immigration bill passed, which would basically declare everybody that made it into the country as a voting citizen. Thankfully, it got tanked, but what they did was reveal their real plan. So even though it failed, what does that tell you? You were being flat. I mean, that's treason at the highest levels. And they were flat. They don't care. They're just, and they'll do this anywhere. So, this is a dangerous time. And as a matter of fact, I think Chile just found out just how dangerous this moment can be. This is footage from Chile where a massive Laena style fire, let's just call it that, a Laena style fire. And I think you all know exactly what that means and what we're looking at the destruction of, okay? So we're seeing Laena style. Look at the destruction in this city. I think they have found their population control weaponry. And by the way, 22 people supposedly died. I think it's going to end up being a lot more than that. 22 people died. It tells you something about fires, man. They move fast and they do a lot of harm. And isn't that something that was prophesied to come? As a matter of fact, we were told that this time would be a time of fire and that our enemy would cause fire to come down from heaven. That was in the book of Revelation. We were told that. So now we're seeing exactly how that's coming to pass. Yeah, that's pretty much my response, Alan. Wow. Exactly. And it's pretty heartless because it's not just, the immediate deaths that you see. It's the devastation to their, did you see that? Like the devastation to their economies, to their homes, to their lives. This is not just here and there. This is every structure. Every structure. Look at this, guys. Vehicles, everything that they had, gone. These poor folks are just trying to figure out how to live, how to survive. And this is what you want everybody to be equal. They can be equal in misery. So there's a real problem there. And this is exactly what the book of Revelation told us would occur, that would happen. So yes, we are dealing with as wicked as it gets, as evil as it gets, and we need to continue to pray. This is why you are being awakened. You are his army, terrible with banners. You are being awakened for a reason. It is not just to entertain or educate you. It is to equip you so we can get in this, so we can begin to take up our places, pray with understanding, pray in and under authority, and in the place he has assigned for us, because that's the only place your equipment will work. How many know that as long as you're traveling, if you could be a 5-star general, if you're still traveling to your duty station, you're not there yet, you can't use that general power. But how many know that when you arrive at your duty station and you put your things in your desk and you get your uniform on and assume the command you've been given, now things are going to change. Get to your battle station. Somebody say amen. And now we're seeing, again, this is something, just a shout out to my brother and all of you who've been praying for the lights to be turned on. Remember what I told you about their invisibility spells, right? They're not working anymore. And more than 500 were arrested in California's human trafficking operation. And I love seeing this, because as far as I'm concerned, all these pedophiles need to be put in prison. A statewide human trafficking crackdown this month netted more than 500 arrests and rescued dozens of people, including juveniles, authorities said January 31st during a news conference in downtown Los Angeles. So I'm super excited about that. 539 suspects, including 40 alleged sex traffickers and 270 alleged sex buyers. Good for you guys. Officials cited among the rescued were 54 adults and 11 minors, including a 14-year-old girl. Time to go to war, brethren. All right, you're winning. Keep pressing this fight. I mean, that's all I can tell you is you're winning. You're winning. They're not, the pedophiles are in the open. They're exposed. Okay, they're exposed. They're no longer able to hide. They can't double talk. None of us want to hear what their excuses are. They can start talking unless they're saying sorry to their victim. We don't want to hear a word they have to say. That's the only thing we want to see or hear, is they acknowledge that they've hurt someone and they need to repent. I don't want to hear no excuses. I don't want to hear your double talk. Come on, somebody, help me with this. But there's nothing gets my grandfather thing going, right? Some of you grandpas and uncles and dads out there, come on with me here, because I'll tell you right now, I'm so glad to see that the triggers build on this stuff. I saw another report that is exposing, that blood drug. I don't want to say it, but you know which one I'm talking about. Well, they're exposing those that are making that. It's coming out in the public. In fact, Benjamin Fulford had if you go over to his website, he was exposing literally a report. I'm not going to put it on here today, but I would recommend you at least, well, if you want to know more about that, you can. It's gruesome stuff. Okay, gruesome stuff. And as a matter of fact, this atmosphere is changing. Look at this, guys. Blood on your hands. Mark Zuckerberg was obliterated this last week. So you see, it comes in moments. It's coming like in a little bit of a flood right now. So we just talked about this. I was just commending our brother who was praying over the East Coast, and tunnels got found. Remember that? Okay. Well, do you see the momentum? This is what I want you to notice. The momentum is building. Blood on your hands. Mark Zuckerberg obliterated as tech CEOs grilled over child sexual exploitation, and Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg and other social media executives were grilled over the issue of child sexual exploitation. When have you ever heard this conversation going on in the public in Congress? When in your, I'm 60, when in your adult life have you ever seen this being discussed here in the public like this? Have you ever seen it? Please put your comments in the description. I really look forward to hearing your thoughts, because it is truly amazing, in my opinion, to see this conversation happening in the public. This tells me you're winning. Okay. They would rather talk about anything but this. Somebody had to make that happen. You're winning. Come on, Remnant. Continue to govern as you have been seated in heavenly places. Okay. This is the time for that. This is not the time for cowardice. And how many know that if you're going to discover the truth on anything, you got to have some courage? This is going to be a tough walk. He's sorting the harvest right now. Do you have what it takes to finish? Somebody say, oh, man. Whew. Man, I'll tell you what, this particular topic, as you guys all well know, is a hot one for me. And if you've recovered from abuse, if you overcame abuse, maybe you were somebody that was physically abused, maybe sexually abused, maybe one of your family members were, you have a special kind of, you know what I mean? Okay. A special kind of, oh, no, you didn't. That comes up in your Ruach. And that's what comes up when we pray. That's the way we need to be the government of Elohim and call the light into these dark places. Keep doing it because it's working. So I see momentum. I want to encourage every one of you. You just keep on calling that light into these dark places. And then we'll report the news that says you did it. Okay. This is actual confirmation that the saints are winning the day. Somebody say amen. The bad guys are getting caught. They're being exposed. And Zuckerberg had to issue an apology. He actually apologized. Zuckerberg issued a rare apology to the families and parents of children who have been harmed by his platforms. What? I'm sorry for everything you've been through, he said awkwardly. No one should go through the things that your families have suffered. Okay. I wasn't going to show you this. Well, I'll just tell you about it. You can go over to benjaminfulford.com. But there's a text that he put up, this guy, talking about, the stuff that they get from itty bitty people. All right. I hope you guys are reading between the lines real well. And he's like, well, I don't like the process, but boy, that's real good stuff, basically, is what he said. And he couldn't erase it because somebody copied it. And so, you could say you're sorry all you want. Okay. I mean, I hope that repentance is sincere, but how many know? Come on, somebody help me now. You need to bring forth what? Fruit, meat for repentance. So don't just tell us you're sorry. Show us you're sorry. Come on, somebody. Amen. Yeah, Alan, you got it. You understand? Okay. I can't really talk about that, but you know what I'm talking about. You guys are sharp. I already knew you'd figure it out. Yeah. Yeah. They had a text from him basically saying, that's good stuff. Well, then your apology falls flat. Right? Yeah. Help us find the bad guys. Don't just say, I'm sorry. Help us find the bad guys. You know where they are, right? Okay. So we're not quite so moved by your apology. But what we do note is this conversation is now happening in the public. Okay. And it's not one outlet. It's been several outlets. Here's another outlet. I mean, it became big news. His apology is big news. So that's good. That's good. And it's to me, that's your victory. To get these guys that they have to come into the public and admit what they've been doing, that's you guys. You won that fight. You won that fight. Okay. And I'm going to give you that victory. I'm not taking that one from you. I'm going to say it if no one else does. I'm going to congratulate the saints for being courageous. Now keep going. Don't quit here. Okay. Don't quit here. Yeah. I'm sorry. Right. Exactly. Well, that's how before if you were abused and before you go do anything to anybody, you need some help. That's one thing. Compassion City. Man, once you cross this line and you are hurting anything under 18 years old, let's be clear. So anybody out there doing it, remember we were talking about all these pastors with their undercover cameras and 14-year-olds and all this other stuff. This can't be tolerated. Can't traumatize our children like that. They're too precious to us. Come on, somebody help me with that one. All right, I got to calm down so I get kind of animated, and I got to wrap this up. Sorry about that. And I just want to mention, look at this. It's been happening. Catastrophic flooding swamps Los Angeles area as deadly atmospheric river slams California. This isn't normal. Just so we're clear. NOAA's Weather Prediction Center has placed about 14 million people in Southern California, including Los Angeles area, under a rare high risk of flash flooding as the storm has already dumped several inches of rain, and it's looking like more is coming. And it's a dire situation. Dire. Now, we're just right here on this little bit. So you know what we're going to get? You know what we're going to get? We're going to get gentle rain. Everybody else going to get slam, bam, thank you, ma'am. We're going to get gentle rain. Somebody will say, oh, it's no big deal. Mm-hmm. That's what Pharaoh said when the frogs came. And that's what Pharaoh said when the fleas came. And that's what Pharaoh said when darkness came. And that's what Pharaoh said when the River Nile turned to blood. It's no big deal. It's just it's natural. Yeah, when his army is underneath the Red Sea, I suppose that was natural too, right? Elohim knows how to do what he's doing. Amen. He knows how to do what he's doing. And he's not running for king. He doesn't need anybody's vote. He is king. Somebody say amen. And so that's going to be it for tonight, folks. I know that was a bit of a heavy one, but we had to get through a few things. And I'm glad that you are all with me in this journey and together with one another. Your eyes are open. You're seeing things you never saw before. I think it's a very amazing moment that we're in. And I really believe that Elohim has stopped us all. And if you're here on the broadcast with us, well, then he's stopping you as well. And he's calling you into unity with your brethren. Because I want to tell you right now, again, if you're in transit, if you're in between your duty stations, well, then you're not going to be effective. You are like a plant that is still in transit. How can you bear fruit if you're still in a pot? You need to be planted. You need to be connected. You need to be united with your brethren somewhere. There has to be a place that you call home, a place where he has connected you to the vine. Amen. And I'd remind everybody that he is called not but for the lost sheep of the house of Yasharel. So if you haven't grafted in, well, you really should. Thank you again for joining us. That's tonight's broadcast. We look forward to seeing you on Shabbat. And we want to encourage every one of you to continue to pray for and bless one another in love in the name of Mashiach, that you would be one of those that finish well before him. Thank you so much for joining him. May Elohim bless each and every one of you. Good night.